Hello everybody and welcome back to another Atris Studios tutorial. Now today we're going to be getting into creating the engine for our inventory system. Now specifically speaking, we're going to allow us to be able to add items and remove items, just like so. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so the first thing that we want to do is go over to our item data or item class script. Now the item class is simply just the holder for data about the item itself. And we want to be able to make sure that we have a public integer called max stack size added to here. Now I set mine to 64 because I'm a big fan of Minecraft, but you guys can set yours to whatever you feel like it. This just simply allows us to limit the size of our current stacks. The next thing you need to do is go over to your inventory holder script. Now, I'm assuming that you guys have been following along from the previous tutorial. If you haven't, make sure to go back to that video, watch it all the way through. That way you have everything ready to go. Alright, so we're going to roll up to the top, and I'm going to go ahead and just hide all the stuff that we don't really need to be looking at right now. So inside here we have, of course, a public inventory called inventory. This was inside of the original tutorial. And that's basically the list of items that you see over here. Now, what we want to do is we also want to get a public transform called display. Now, the display is the screen that allows us to be able to see our inventory slots, right? So if you recall, inside the previous tutorial, we created our inventory window, which holds our dynamic inventory display. And all this is simply a holder that holds all the inventory slots, right? So that's exactly what we're going to be using this inventory or public transform for. We're basically going to be using it as a way of accessing the slots. Next, we're going to be creating a private integer called return amount. This is simply saying if we have an overflow of numbers inside of our add item function, we'll have that variable available for us to be able to mess with. So let's go ahead and start from the bottom to the top inside this one. I know that's very strange, but I mean, who cares, right? So inside here, we have a public void called update UI slot. And in fact, actually, I can make that private, but I mean, who cares? Anyway, so inside this, it requires two variables, an integer called index and an item data class called data, right? Now, the first thing we want to ask inside here is if our current display, so if the display.child count is less than or equal to 0. Basically, what it looks like now, there are no children objects of this inventory window, which means that it is 0, right? So in other words, we want to return from this function. We don't want to update the UI slot because there are no slots to update. Otherwise, we're going to create an inventory slot variable called slot, and we're going to then make it equal to our display.getChild, and we're going to find the index of that array, right? And then we're going to get the component, the inventory slot, which now allows us to be able to have access to the inventory slot data. Then we're going to grab our slot and we're going to update using that function we created inside the previous tutorial. And all we need to do is plug in this item data right here, so call it data. A very simple function that gets the job done. All right, the next thing we need to do is create a public item data function called remove item. Now you may wonder, why are we using an item data function instead of like a public void function, right? So the reason why we're using an item data function is because we want to actually be able to return an item data value. So say for instance, if we pick up an item, like say for instance I do, and then I put it right over here, right? I want to be able to transfer that item between this slot and that slot, right? So in other words, I need to be able to have something which contains a temporary value, which I need to be able to have access to whatever that value is. So in other words, this item data. It'll be a lot easier to explain once we actually get down to the tooltip. But you know, that's probably going to be the next video. All right, so this is also going to require a integer called index, and it's going to require a boolean called isFullStack. So inside of my game, I don't necessarily need to be able to divide my stacks in half. But say for instance in Minecraft, you are allowed to divide your stacks in half by like right clicking, right? So I want to make it to where if you want to be able to have this inside your game, you could do so just by simply putting in a false statement or true statement on whatever you put in your inputs, which, like I said, probably next video. All right, so at the top here, as you can see, we created an item data class called current selected slot, and this is going to be equal to our inventory, so our inventory script. And let's actually come over here and grab our tester so we can visualize this. Okay. So what we're doing is we're going to make this current selected slot equal to our inventory. So as you can see, our inventory dot items dot index. So our current index that we have right here. Then we're going to set a new form of item data called temp data. So this is a temporary data which may be added or removed inside of this script, right? And we're going to make it equal to a new item data class, which means that everything is equal to null. The item is equal to empty, and the stack is equal to 0. We want to then assign this temp data stack. So we're going to say temp data.item is equal to our current selected slot.item. Our stack size for this temp data is also going to be equal to the current selected slot stack size. Okay. So that's just all the precursors for getting everything hooked together so we don't have to write all this out every single time, okay? So the next thing that you want to do is create a switch gate, and we're going to use isFullStack, which is this boolean right here, as our condition. So if the case is equal to true, we're going to set our current selected slot equal to null, and I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to say temp data is equal to our current selected slot. Again, this is just a backup, just in case this did not update, but I just thought about that beforehand. And let me actually do this dot. Yeah. So let's go ahead and then go over to update UI slot. Actually, we'll just say is equal to null. How about that? Yeah, there we go. So, and then we're gonna update UI slot. We're going to put in our index value, which of course is the current slot that we are accessing. And we're also going to be putting in this null value as so. The other case would be false, true and false for a boolean. And we're going to basically create our half stack value. Now to do this, we're going to create an integer called half stack, right? Then we're going to go through a mathematic function called mathf, and we're going to say we're going to dot round to int. So say for instance we have 3 items inside of our stack, right? And we want to be able to divide that in half. Well, 1.5 is a float, it's not an integer, right? So we want to be able to round to an int, which allows us to be able to round that to either 1 or 2, right? That way we get a definite answer and we can always return as a number. So to get that number, we're going to grab our current selected slot stack size and we're going to divide it by 2. Right? Simple. We'll then assign the temp data stack size to our half stack, and then we're going to take the current stack size and we're going to subtract it, so minus equals our half stack. So in other words, we're adding to the temp data and we're removing from the current data. Then we'll update the UI slot, grab our index, and then also grab in our current selected slot. The temp data, we don't necessarily need to update here. That would be on the mouse tooltip. And like I said, next video. So yeah, we just need to update the slot that we're currently working in. Okay, so outside of the switch statement, we're then going to return the temp data, which now means that whatever temp data is equal to, that's the data that's going to be returned, okay? All right, so the last function that we need to cover, of course, is our public boolean called add item. So the reason why we create this as a boolean is simple. Can we pick up the item or can we not pick up the item? If we can pick up the item, we're going to pick it up, we're going to remove it, we're going to add it to the inventory system. If we can't, we're going to leave it where it is and we're not going to add it. Okay, simple as that. All right, so for this, we only need to have an item data called item data to add. And inside here, we're going to create a for loop, right? So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be running through every single one of these till we find situation or condition of what we want. And we'll get into those conditions in a minute. So we're going to create a variable called current selected slot, and this is going to be equal to the inventory dot items, so the list of items, and we're then going to have I, which is going to be just a number value that runs through 0 all the way till the end, right? All right, so we're going to create an integer called the total count, and the total count is equal to the current selected slot stack size plus the item data to add dot stack size. So we're going to be combining these together. That way we can figure out if we have more than the max stack size or less than the max stack size, okay? So our condition is simple here. We're going to be trying to find an item, right? So if our current selected slot dot item is equal to the item data to add dot item, right? So basically saying, are those two equivalent? Do they equal the same item? Then if they do, then we also need to have an and here. So make sure to put 2 and marks. We want to make sure that the current selected slot stack size is not equal to its max stack size. So if you recall, we created the max stack size inside of our item class script, right? So we're grabbing that item and we're checking to see if the max stack size is, or if these two are not equal, because we don't want them to be greater than, right? If it is, say for instance we have 64 items here, it's just simply going to skip over that element and we're going to go to the next one instead. So it's not going to waste its time. Okay, so for our first condition, we need to first check if our total count is less than or equal to our current selected slot. It's basically its max stack size, right? If it is less than that or equal to it, so if it equals to, well, according to what I have, which is 64, if it's equal to 64 or less than 64, then we're going to run this function right here. Otherwise, we're going to run this function, which we'll get into that in a second. So if we run this function right here, we're going to create an integer called desired amount to add, which is equal to the total count minus the current selected slot size, or the stack size of that current selected slot. Now, you could simply just do the item data to add dot stack here instead, but this is just a good practice right here to be able to make sure that we have exactly the number we want. All right, so then we're going to set the current stack size plus equal to the desired amount to add. All right, so we just simply update the stack size instead. Then we're going to update the UI slot. If you remember the function we used down below, we're going to get the index, which is I, and we're going to get the current selected slot. So we're going to be updating the data with the current selected slot. Then we're going to return amount as 0. So this return amount, we're going to make it equal to 0 because there's nothing that we actually returned. Then return is equal to true. So we picked up the item. Now we'll go over to the else statement here. So let me go and close this one right here. So if the total count is greater than our max stack size, and then we're going to say our current selected stack size is equal to our max stack size of that current slot, right? So basically we're just maxing it out. Then we need to get our int value. So we're going to int desired amount to add is equal to the total count minus the current selected slot .item.max stack size. So we take the value of what our current max is. So let's just say our current max value is 65, right? Then we subtract the max stack size of our current slot, and that would be 64. So you would equal 1, which now means that you have one extra amount, which is equal to our desired amount to add. Then we're going to update the slot. So we're going to get the I index, and then we're also going to get our current selected slot. Then we're going to set the return amount equal to the desired amount to add, which is currently 1. Next, we're going to ask a question, right? So if you don't have this if statement here, what's going to happen is you're going to get an infinite loop, and we don't want that infinite loop. So we make sure we have this if statement here called if return amount is greater than 0. We're going to create a temporary item data class called temp data, and we're going to make it equal to a new item data, which is equal to null currently. We're going to set its value, so the item is equal to the item the data I can't even say that. Item data to add dot item, and we're also going to do the same thing with the stack, except the return stack or return amount is going to be what we're going to use here for the stack size. Basically saying if we have any left over, we're going to try to add that amount. Okay, then we're going to set the return amount is equal to 0, since we already assigned the amount to return. And then we're going to say add item, which is calling the same class again, and we're going to add in our temp data, like so. Then we'll return true, saying that yes, it worked. Now outside of this, we're also going to return true as well. This is just a backup return true, just in case you don't go through this function right here. Okay, so let's go and close that up. All right, so that's all if you found the item. So if you didn't find the item, we need to search for an empty slot. So if we say else if current slot or selected slot dot item is equal to null, which if we come over here, you could see that we have one that equals null, right? Then it's going to basically find that slot. But if all these items were filled up, that means it's not going to find that slot. We're basically going to, we're not going to be able to find anything at all. So, yeah. So we found the slot, which is equal to null, and we're going to then set this item. So current selected slot.item is equal to the item data to add.item, as well as the stack. We're going to do the same thing. Then we're going to update the UI slot, I as in our index, current selected slot as our value. Return amount is equal to 0 because there's nothing that we need to return. And then return true, saying that we did add the item. So outside of the for loop, we're going to return false, saying that we went through the for loop, but we couldn't find any of those conditions to be met, which means that we can't add the item, just like so. All right, so that covers basically the entire script. We do have the testing part, which you could just take a look at what I got here and simply add whatever you want as well. Just as a quick description, down here, basically I'm creating this item data class called temp item, and we're assigning it to the remove item value because if you recall, this is a return value of item data. You don't have to actually have this here. Like you could actually remove that and it will still run. Oh, hold on. Yeah, it'll still run the script with this remove item, right? But if you want to be able to control where that temp data goes, then you could simply create a variable called item data called temp item, and it will allow you to be able to then move it wherever you want. So as you can see right here, I simply ran a debug with this temp item, and it allows us to be able to see that we can actually move it around, okay? So hit Control S, and let's go back over into Unity. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to just take a look at what we have here. We're going to add the items just like before, and I'm also going to go over a little something that you will need to keep an eye out for whenever you are creating your game, because it is an issue, especially whenever you are creating, well, adding items as well. So, yeah. All right, there she goes. She was taking a little bit too long, if you know what I mean, just a little bit too long. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the issue that we're going to have, okay? So let's just go over to our example 1, which is our item, right? So our max stack size for example 1 is 1, right? And for our example 2, our max stack size is 64, okay? So we're going to grab our tester, and we're going to just start off with 9, right? This way we can visually see what's going on, and yeah, because this thing likes getting in the way. So yeah, let's go ahead and press play. As you can see, our testing items is equal to example 2, and our stack size is equal to 32, okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to click, and as you can see, this updated over here. I'm going to press tab now to open up our inventory window. If I click again, as you can see, it added again. If I right click, it removes the item. If we go over to our console, as you can see, it also gives us a description of how much we return as well. So that all works. Now, if we change this to our example 1, and let's go ahead and change the stack size to 1, as you can see, we can now add items there as well. Now, the issue that you may run into is, say for instance, if we change our stack size to like 32, right? Well, the max stack size for this item is equal to 1. So whenever we press, as you can see, it adds 32, right? Which is a problem. We don't really want that. So we could create a condition inside of our code, which basically returns its value as 1 regardless of whatever this says based on the max stack size. But this is just, it's only a problem if you are actually programming it in a way of adding this stack like so. So just keep that in mind whenever you're adding the stacks, that you don't exceed your max stack size, because it does break what you're supposed to do. So yeah. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, check out some of the other videos. If you have any questions, make sure to leave those in the comment section below. I'll be happy to get to those as soon as possible. Also want to thank the dude for pointing out that I did need to update my color, so then it's easier for you guys to read as well. I do read y'all's comments, so yeah. All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.